If you're at your screen this morning and haven't seen it yet, you need to keep watching right now, because the allegation made in Washington today is one of the heaviest, most striking, and most unexpected accusations in recent years. $5 million. Between Trump and Epstein, and the person who revealed this is the FBI's own director. No one thought this moment would come in this way. In the decades-long memory of Washington, there has never been a moment when an FBI director publicly disclosed a financial transaction record of an incumbent president from his own investigation file. There had never been such a moment before, because such a moment would simultaneously disrupt the functioning of institutions, the political balance, and history itself. Today, that moment has arrived, and Washington is trying to cope with this reality. But the story starts long before that $5 million. The starting point is 2019. Jeffrey Epstein was awaiting in a jail in New York. The trial date was approaching. His lawyers were preparing the defense strategy, and Epstein knew very well how valuable the information he possessed was. At that time, Epstein's financial advisors structured certain transactions. Some of these transactions were conducted through offshore accounts. Some of them were carried out through intermediary companies that did not have a direct connection. And among these transactions, there was a single record that the FBI would later mark. $5 million. This money transferred from one account to another, and the trace of that second account through a long chain led to a single name: Donald Trump. When Cash Patel shared this information with the public today, the room froze for a second, because this was not the answer to a question asked by a senator. This was not a document leaked by informants. This was not a finding uncovered by an investigative journalist. This was something the FBI director said in his own words, based on his own agency's investigation. And that was just 5 words, but the rest was interesting. A transaction record of $5 million. $5 million transaction record. So how did this happen? The Senate Banking Committee had gathered that morning for a routine session. The agenda included the activities of the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, anti-money laundering strategies, and offshore account tracking protocols. It was expected to be a technical, boring, bureaucratic session. Cash Patel was, as always, prepared. With her were lawyers, pre-approved answers, and a linguistic shield designed to deflect every question. At 10:47, Senator Richard Blumenthal took the floor, and everything changed. Blumenthal got straight to the point. Director, did the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit follow specific financial transactions as part of the Epstein investigation? Patel gave the standard response. A comprehensive financial analysis was conducted as part of the Epstein investigation. In this analysis, were Epstein's financial connections with American businessmen examined? The investigation covered all relevant financial networks. Have the financial connections with politicians been investigated? The investigation was thorough. Were financial connections with former or current government officials investigated? Patel paused for a second. The investigation, any financial connections, has any financial transaction record related to Donald Trump been identified in this investigation? The room changed. Patel looked at his lawyer. The lawyer slightly shook his head from side to side. Patel looked at Blumenthal. And then he did something no one expected. He answered the question. Senator, various financial transaction records were examined as part of the investigation. Among these records, a chain of transactions amounting to $5 million was identified, originating from an account linked to Epstein's financial network and ultimately reaching an account within the Trump Organization. The hall erupted. The committee chair tried to restore order. Blumenthal continued, unable to hide the shock on his face. Director, can you repeat that? $5 million in a transaction chain from an account linked to Epstein's financial network to an account within the Trump Organization is recorded in the investigation file. $5 million in a transaction chain from an account linked to Epstein's financial network to an account within the Trump Organization is recorded in the investigation file. Blumenthal had to conduct an interrogation he had never prepared for from that moment on, because this answer was outside the plan. No one expected this answer, including Blumenthal, but Blumenthal, with decades of federal prosecutorial experience, knew that only one thing mattered at that moment: to continue. To properly communicate this matter to the public, when did this process take place? Patel answered. The transaction chain took place in multiple stages within the year 2019. The transaction chain took place in multiple stages within the year 2019. During Epstein's detention? Some of the transactions overlap with the period when Epstein was in custody. The hall froze once again. Epstein was in custody, and during his imprisonment, $5 million had flowed from his financial network to the Trump Organization. This transaction, how was it structured? Multiple intermediary accounts and offshore structures were used. The transaction chain was designed in such a way that it would not give the appearance of a direct connection. Were they intentionally hidden then? Patel gave a careful answer. The transaction structure was distinctly different from standard financial transactions. What does this difference mean? This led to the investigation falling within the scope of the review. This led to the investigation being included in the review scope. The second series of questions was built upon the first. Blumenthal had snapped out of his shock and returned to his prosecutor persona. Director, what could this $5 million have been paid for? Patel gave a careful answer. The investigation did not reach the stage of definitively determining the nature of this transaction. Could it not reach it, or was it not wanted to reach it? The room tensed. Patel looked at his lawyer. The lawyer averted his gaze. The investigation process could not be fully completed due to certain obstacles. What obstacles? At certain stages of the investigation, high-level interventions occurred. High-level interventions. Blumenthal repeated. Who intervened? Silence. Director. Who intervened in this investigation? This information to share with the public. This committee. Who intervened? Patel took a deep breath. High-ranking officials from the Ministry of Justice requested the closure of certain branches of the investigation. Senior officials from the Ministry of Justice requested the closure of certain branches of the investigation. The third question changed the entire atmosphere of the room. Director, is this case file still in the FBI's records? Patel replied. The record is available in the investigation file. Was it not deleted? No. Wasn't it reclassified? Patel paused for a second. The classification level of certain materials has been changed. This material, too. Long silence. The classification process for this material is ongoing. It's ongoing. Blumenthal leaned forward. So the classification level of this $5 million transaction record is still debatable. Technically, yes. And when did this discussion start? Patel did not answer. Director, when did the discussion about the classification of this material start? Specific date after the Trump administration began. Silence. Can't you answer this question, or don't you want to? Can't you answer this question, or don't you want to? Before Blumenthal spoke his final words, there was a long silence. This senior senator from Connecticut had served for decades as a federal prosecutor. He had handled every kind of financial crime case, money laundering, offshore transactions, deliberately convoluted transaction chains, and today he was talking about that experience in full. Director, he said, explain this to me. Patel was waiting. $5 million are flowing from Epstein's financial network to the Trump Organization. This transaction is carried out with a deliberately concealed structure. The investigation detects this operation. But then, high-level interventions shut down certain branches of the investigation. And now, the classification level of this material is being debated during the Trump administration. He paused. When looking at this table, the question I have to ask you is, who is being protected? Patel did not answer. What was this $5 million? A service fee? A hush money? Something else? Silence. And why is the answer to this question still a secret? And why is the answer to this question still a secret? If you're curious about the answers to these questions and don't want to miss the continuation of this story, stay tuned. Because this $5 million transaction record was not the last question of these inquiries. It's just the beginning of a process. When the hearing ended, the hall remained silent for a long time. Because what happened today was not a usual interrogation. Senators had interrogated senators. Informants had leaked documents. Journalists had investigated. But today, The FBI director himself disclosed a $5 million transaction record from his own agency's file to the public. And that statement was irrevocable. It was now in the congressional records. It was now in the minutes. It was now written in the most unchangeable place in history. $5 million between Trump and Epstein in 2019 during his detention, with a deliberately concealed chain of transactions and with high-level interventions that shut down the investigation. Every within the scope of the investigation answer gave birth to another question. Her statement that the classification process is ongoing brought a new question to light, and every silence made the $5 million deal sound a little louder. When Patel said that figure today, there was no going back. $5 million is now on the record, and the question, who is being protected, is now everyone's question. Patel said the amount, $5 million between Trump and Epstein, and Washington will never be the same again. If you don't want to miss the continuation of this story, stay tuned, because this case record is not the last question of these inquiries, and each new hearing continues from where the previous one left off.